people that have some expectations, that have ideas. They maybe want to do a superb documentation. They want perfect page layouts. There's like lots of potential also. But in our case, we realized at some point very, very soon that there's a first hurdle you have to overcome. And then we simply get busy. We called it the chicken and egg problem. Because in Confluence, you need contributors to add content, right? You need people that bring things into Confluence, that document, that write. So that's one thing. But at the same time, you need content to attract contributors, and to inspire. Like we saw in the chat, we have empty paper anxiety, overwhelmed. So grateful for templates. I will come back to that later. But yeah, this is the chicken and egg problem that we saw ourselves. And I guess this sounds very familiar to you. So naturally, things evolve, and then you start creating content. And some pages are used more, some are not. Some, in a way, maybe things you set up, and at some point they just end up like abandoned in a way. Or you just drop ideas. Like in our case, it was documenting every product decision we made. Sometimes stuff, too much work, you will steer away from ideas. So, but things got rolling, and content got more. That made us realize very soon there's a way worse beast in terms of an issue that we had to tackle. Because at some point we had so much content and so many contributors that the space itself became unmanageable. Yeah, and it was, honestly speaking, it was a hideous mess, and it scared contributors more than attracting them, because valuable content was hard to find. So it was in a way, a critical moment, and this, let's say, chicken and egg problem turned into more interesting, too many chickens and too many eggs problem. That was what we are facing in that situation. And that's why I'm here today. I was already introduced. I'm Max. I'm product marketing manager at K15T. And today our topic will be 3 simple steps to keeping your Confluence content valuable and avoid the common pitfalls. So I hope you will, I hope you will hear either stuff you already know and remember again, or learn new things. So let's directly jump in the first step. And the first step is maybe the most important one. It's to turn your mental model into a sensible structure. So when we started with our space, mostly started by my colleague Robert here, he already had a kind of mental model, how it will look like, how it should look like. So what is a mental model? Basically, it's an explanation of his thought process about how things should work and be structured in this instance. So which is good, because we need a mental model to turn it into a structure. Talking in Confluence, let's say, it was pretty easy that design assets, for example, will end up under a parent page called design. Features will end up as dedicated child pages. Marketing campaigns end up in a quarterly planning. So this is, in a way, the sensible structure we have. And the challenge here is that just because one individual has this sensible structure, this mental model, does not mean at all that this is shared by the team. In fact, each and every one of us has his own mental model and the vision they want to follow. How they want to in a way contribute and structure things, especially in Confluence. And I guess you're all very well aware that everyone is very unique when it comes to how do you operate Confluence. Especially the ones like Andy with more than 10 years experience. I guess you've seen a lot. So kudos. And we personally realized at some point, So if you leave everyone adding and contributing according to their own method, this and according how they want to organize things themselves, you will end up in a mess. I mean, we don't have to call it anarchy. I guess with a bit of alignment, you will always end up in only with a little mess, not in total anarchy, but it is not a good state. So to avoid that, it's very important to really start communicating this kind of sensible structure, your mental model, with everyone before you start really contributing and working on adding content. That's the easiest way that you can avoid this kind of mess in the beginning. And it's a very common mistake to not do that. And I can say that from my personal experience, also working in different companies with Confluence, that you simply cannot assume that everyone shares your mental model or understands intuitively where everything should end up, in the Confluence, where it should be placed. And so this sentence on this slide is something you could easily print on a sign, hang it everywhere someone is working with Confluence. I think it's an as classic statement as I heard years ago. Well, if it's not in Confluence, it doesn't exist. So this is one of the big truths when it comes to Confluence. Share this kind of model and structure and line on it. And don't assume anything. It will not work. So thankfully, when it comes to creating a sensible structure with your team, we would say we have 3 helpful tips to share with you. For starters, start with the obvious. That is really don't underestimate spaces. Spaces are, as you know, a container for information, and you should use them to separate information. And I know this is easier said than done, and it's always causing a discussion. So what defines a space? Like what's this threshold to put stuff into place, into a space? We personally at K15T, each team has their own space. And sometimes, of course, you have spaces that are per project or per customer. But in a way, that's the approach we started with. Each team has their own space to create their structure. The second thing is to really simplify as much as possible your top-level page structure. So you maybe notice page trees that just go on and on and on. And you should really try to aim for something that reflects your structure and your mental model, but in the simplest way possible. So, for example, we tried in our team space to not overcomplicate things and overthink things. So we the overall structure, the top level structure, is depending on roles, on team roles. So you create a space in a way that every role has a dedicated space to document specific things. For example, in our case, central product level processes are stored within a top level parent page called the product. And we have then marketing, we have product marketing, we have development. So this is something that helped us a lot in creating the structure that also is for like long-term success of your documentation. But be aware that, of course, not everything fits into page hierarchies. And sometimes you will come across outliers. So it's important to also make use of structured content. By duplicating, before we start duplicating content, we will always tend to use labels and especially page properties to break this information down and then group content of specific kinds in separate places across Confluence and use reports in different locations. So that's one important part as well of this sensible structure topic. Don't duplicate. Use the tools you have, like labels and page properties. As an example, we, for example, have our weekly blog posts that are created in each separate team space. And we use content by label, the macro, pull them into the main blog post where they then will be distributed. And finally, also shared with everyone. So that were like the three most important things I would say is to help you create a sensible structure. Second step that is very important is to enable contributors to create content. Yeah, and that is something you cannot consider enough, because the most efficient way of getting everyone to follow this structure and the mental model is simply to simplify the process of contributing. So everyone should be able to add content, and I mean, in a perfect world, it would be as easy and as enjoyable as possible to for the users. And I guess you know that from yourself. Like you said, you're happy to use templates. Exactly. You're happy to, or you had talked about empty paper anxiety. You want to try to get this out of the way and just enable people to add their content. So provide some guidelines to be creative in a shared mindset. So sounds fancy, a guideline to be creative in a shared mindset. And it sounds maybe abstract, but it's a very simple and practical method to achieve that in Confluence really is use templates and blueprints. Help your team, help your users and colleagues to understand what information they have to enter, they have to fill out. So avoid this stress sitting in front of a white page. Yeah, it's easily avoidable in a way. And one tip, because from our side, we have a free app that's called Create from Template Pro, which takes this Create from Template basic functionality in Confluence to let's say it extends it by multiple features, be it advanced options for parent pages, be it adding custom variables, or be it a very simple thing to make it more visually appealing, that you have a button there that you can freely name and in a way influence of, hey, here, that's the thing, create this button to create a new page, make it more appealing, make it nicer. So we are doing this in our own space for our idea page. So when you help an idea to help with the product that you want to see in the product, everyone across the company, so not only our team, everyone in the company can navigate to our idea board, simply click the big button for the template and fill out necessary information. And that's all. So it's easy for like an outstanding person in our team, in our case from our app team, to contribute, to add to our visual presentation is always important. So I mean, the more appealing things are in Confluence, the more enjoyable it is to consume content, the more you will also likely want to contribute. So that's a very important point. Totally right, Matthew. And apart from templates and blueprints, one thing you should really use is page properties for storing metadata and creating reports on those pages. There's so many use cases where you want to maybe pull that into reports, because it just works. So taking the page properties, for example, for be it your meeting notes, be it your ideas, be it initiatives, projects, you create them on your multiple pages and create, of course, reports from it and reference those pages and have at least static visual report on the metadata you put into your system. But there's one thing with page properties that is a bit of a bummer, is that page properties and the macro itself is in a way very limited when it comes to providing more structure. And we said it's important to provide structure. And with page properties, you can basically do that, but yeah, you also have, let's say, some room for failure, because you cannot be very clear about everything. So looking at, for example, a status is it can done can be designed, interpreted, or set up in so many different ways. And you should know this. Do you use a status macro? Do you use a checkbox? How do you format it? That's something that made us come up with a different app that I mentioned earlier. This is orderly databases for Confluence. And there was this whole page properties thing. And I bet every one of you who has been using Confluence for a while used page properties, but also knows the limitations of page properties, especially when it comes to specific macros within page properties and reporting on them. So orderly is our way to replace page properties and tables in general, because you put information in some kind of it's called a database, and you define field types and can use user mentions, have selectable fields, but you have a way to create a clear structure, and fields have their specific settings. So like you can see here in the select list, done will always mean done. It will not be the blue done in the status macro. It will not be a click checkbox. So that's basically our main purpose with orderly databases. So we have a better structure, and we avoid one limitation of page properties, which is syncing data and being able to display and edit data from everywhere. Like, page properties are attached to a page, means you can only edit it on the page and not in the report. So what you can do here, for example, someone from our company adds a new entry to the idea database, and the moment you change it on the page or you change it in the database, it will reflect across everywhere. So that's something that helps you to keep data up to date in the most easy way possible, instead of being attached to a page. So that concludes my second step, that we got our mental model, we put it into a sensible structure, and we found a way to provide, in a way, guidance and structure to everyone who wants to contribute. Now that we're done with that, we're able to create content with a clear direction, and we're good, right? So we don't have to take care of anything else. Now this is like we never have to touch it again. We can just lean back and start contributing. I would love to tell you that you fixed all your problems forever like that, but things change, right? People change, new contributors join, new type of content will be required to be documented. New type of content will just appear in your spaces, and on top of that, you always will also make changes to your mental model, to your structure. Things evolve. You will reiterate. You will have a retrospective. Does it still fit what we want to see there? And that means you will have constant work. And that's basically, you have to track and refine content and the structure. So once you set everything up in a sensible way and got it working with guidance, you will have to do gardening, tracking, refining, with content growing and structure being extended. So these are also just useful tips from our perspective that help us in our instance across all teams. So learn from analytics, for example. Yeah, that is something that helps you to understand how your space is being used. And there are multiple ways to use analytics. The simplest one, for example, in Confluence Cloud is the built-in functionality. So you can, for example, see and filter for what pages are not viewed, to see that page is maybe buried in a way, or it's just not used because it's not useful, or it's not used because people also don't find it. So use this kind of analytics to make adjustments to your content, especially if you have like high level pages that are not used. You maybe have to rethink your structure and your naming conventions, so people are more attracted to that page. Another helpful tip here is to really monitor what has been updated and what has been created, because especially with newly created pages, the most important thing is to keep an eye on the page properties, for example, if you use them, to see if it's set up in a correct way, or like we do in Orderly as well. We're using filters. We filter on things to see if everything is in order, and try to make adjustments early on before it's then just existing in Confluence and not being used. So another method also is to use the simple built-in recently updated macro for newly created pages. So we, for example, added it to our overview page in our space, and so you always have that site what is been created, and it's clear to everyone. The last thing is what I already mentioned, and I cannot stress it enough, because Confluence is a monster or a jungle. At some point, you need someone who's gardening this instance, and this is also maybe not. It's not avoidable that you will have to do some homework. It's not a self cleaning system, so you have to get people on board, in a way, educate them, or put them into like make them dedicated gardeners, that they do like a constant and a consistent maintenance. I think this is also one of the most important steps, to have this as a responsibility, and to also share that responsibility. So it's not just one person, but have a common awareness of the importance of doing gardening, and making changes to your model and the content. So yeah, that should really help you to make sure that newly content, for example, and your growing Confluence instance is set up for, let's say, a long-term success, that your content stays valuable, that your content stays enjoyable, and that people are enabled to contribute and find the right information when they are looking for it, which is, I guess, in a system like Confluence, the most important part. So if you try to, if you achieve to manage most of this in a good way, you will have a knowledge base or an intranet that is quick and easy to search. Your information is available in a fast way to everyone, and people are not running around like a headless chicken looking for right information. And it enables people, because it's nice to let's say, work in that instance. So easy, and don't underestimate the effect of this kind of enablement to let people then be creative within Confluence. That's our 3 steps, the simple steps to keeping your content valuable. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the talk. And if you want to find out more, you can add me on LinkedIn, or reach out to me via email, or simply reach out on our website, k15t.com.